Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Hebrews chapter 8 in our continuing study of the general epistles. Hebrews chapters 1 through 8, we saw that the big idea, actually, of the entire epistle is that Jesus is better. He's better than the angels, and he's better than Moses or Joshua. We saw last time he's better as a high priest, and now we begin to see that he's better by providing a better covenant. Chapter 8, verse 1. Now the main point in what has been said is this. This is sort of a summary of what we've said up to this point. We have such a high priest. We talked about the Melchizedek priesthood, that Jesus is. He's not from the tribe of Levi, but he is from a much older priesthood. We have such a high priest who's taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heavens. Notice, that's how we started the epistle. At many different times, many different ways. God spoke through the fathers, through the prophets, through his son who did all these things, and then sat down. And notice we've come full circle. He's taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister in the sanctuary and in the, notice this phrase, the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched, not man. You see, there was a tabernacle back in the Old Testament, a tabernacle that God had given instructions for Moses to prepare and to construct, and they constructed it. But there's also described here a true tabernacle, not the one that Moses pitched, not the ones that people had their hands on, but something that God pitched. Verse 3, for every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices, so it is necessary that this high priest also have something to offer. High priests, that's what they do. They offer sacrifice. And so this high priest, Jesus, had to offer something as well. If you're going to be a high priest, you have to offer something. Verse 4, now if he were on earth, he would not be a priest at all, since there are those who offer the gifts according to the law, and the law is here on earth. And these people who, these priests who offer gifts according to the law, they serve a copy and a shadow of the heavenly things. That is, that the tabernacle was a picture, can I call it this? It was a scale model of the real aspect, the real things, the real presence of God in heaven. It was a picture of heavenly and spiritual realities. Just as Moses was warned by God when he was about to erect the tabernacle, God said to Moses, see, he says, that you make all things according to the pattern which was shown you on the mountain. Where'd the pattern come from? Well, the pattern was a heavenly pattern. It was picturing heavenly realities, spiritual realities. Verse 6, but now he has obtained, that is, Jesus has obtained, a more excellent ministry, by as much as he is also the mediator of a better covenant. You had the old covenant, but Jesus has brought a better covenant, which has been enacted on better promises. So the old covenant came about because there had been promises given, and they were better promises than the old promises. Verse 7, for if that first covenant had been faultless, not that it's, it was a bad covenant, but it wasn't finished yet, it was incomplete. If it had been faultless, there would have been no occasion sought for a second. You don't get rid of the first one, you don't supersede the first one, you don't replace the first one, if the first one does it all. Unless you can come with like covenant 2.0, covenant better, covenant improved. Verse 8, for finding fault with them, and he uses that phrase accordingly, he says, that is, God says, and God himself was the one who said, yes, there's going to be a better covenant. There was the old covenant, there's the covenant, and then there's going to be covenant 2.0. Behold, he says, and he's quoting from Isaiah chapter 31, behold, days are coming, says the Lord, when I will effect a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Notice, a new covenant was promised, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, for they did not continue in my covenant. I did not care for them, says the Lord. They broke that first covenant, so I'm going to give them a new covenant. Can I say it this way? I'm going to give them an unbreakable covenant. Verse 10, for this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my laws into their minds, and I will write them on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. I'm going to take this new covenant, and I'm going to put it in a place where they can't break it. I'll put it on the inside. Instead of them having to do something on the outside, I'll internalize it in them. I'll put my law into their minds. I'll write my law on their hearts. I'll be their God. They will be my people. Verse 11, and they shall not teach everyone his fellow citizen and everyone his brother, saying, know the Lord, because if it's internalized, for all will know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them. Verse 12, for I will be merciful to their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. The new covenant is new because not only because it's internalized, but because it brings forgiveness. It does away with sin. Verse 13, and when he says a new covenant, he has made the first obsolete. In other words, the new covenant replaces the old covenant. But whatever is becoming obsolete and is growing old is ready to disappear. If there's an old covenant, it's replaced by the new covenant, and the writer now is saying the new covenant's come. And that means the old covenant, notice it's not gone yet, because there were people still going to the temple, and there were priests still offering sacrifices. But that's about to end, the writer says. Because, you see, we know something that they hadn't seen yet. In the year 70 AD, the temple would be destroyed. And the sacrifices would cease, and the priests would stop offering them, and there would be no more system. And it still has not returned. Because there's a better covenant. There's a newer covenant. There's covenant 2.0 that has replaced that old covenant. Now, this is T.J. Campo's chart. He's my pastor. The old covenant, going all the way back to creation, in a sense, where God had said, he said in Numbers, indeed, as I live, all the earth will be filled with the glory of the Lord. And God made, from the Garden of Eden, he made a people. You had Adam and Eve, and later on Noah, and finally Abraham and Abraham's seed. And then he promised them a land, a promised land. That's why we call it that. And he promised that they would be a nation, and he eventually grew the nation and planted the nation. And ultimately, he gave them a king, King David, and then Solomon, and kings that followed. And notice that as time went on, it became more and more specific. First of all, there were people, and just, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He said, I'll make people in my image. But then it became more specific to Abraham and to a specific land, not the whole world, but now a specific land, and a specific nation ruled by a specific king. And we follow his descendants all the way down to the time when they're not kings anymore. And yet, it comes to focus in Jesus. That it is in him we see the new covenant. And Jesus himself said in John chapter 12, if I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men to myself. And so that what we have in the new covenant is not just a people, but it is all people. You see, the covenant has gotten bigger. And it's not just a land, but it's the entire world, where he says, go make disciples of all the nations. It's not just the nation of Israel, it's all the nations. And he is the king, not just the king of a little piece of land in the Middle East, but the king of all the world. And whereas in the old covenant you had a temple, now we find out that he is the temple, and he makes his believers the temple as well. That he's building a temple that will fill the world. And whereas in the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, Israel was the vine, he is the vine. And you are the branches. And you've become part of that. And in the Old Covenant, Israel was called to be the servant of the Lord, but he's the ultimate servant, and he is arranging it so that there's coming a day when every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess that he is Lord. And in the Old Covenant, there was a promise of a seed. He is the seed, and all who were connected to him through faith not just through physical birth, but through faith, become part of that seed as well. Have you become part of that seed? Have you come? Have you become part of his temple?